So topping this morning's legal brief, Roger Stone is asking the judge in his obstruction trial to recuse herself. Thursday, the political strategist and friend of President Donald Trump was sentenced to 40 months in prison for lying to Congress and witness tampering. Now, Judge Amy Berman Jackson praised the jurors at his sentencing, and now Stone is asking Judge Jackson to disqualify herself as she weighs his request for a new trial. I want to bring in Shan who's with us. Ask him about this because, Shan, I know that you've got a couple of good answers to some of the questions that are surrounding Stone right now. First and foremost, how likely is it that he can get another trial?
I think it's pretty unlikely. First of all, motions for new trial are rarely granted. His grounds for them seem relatively weak, particularly his argument about maybe a jury person being biased in this instance. What we have to remember is that the jury selection process is under great scrutiny before they get selected. Both sides get a lot of information about the jurors. They get to question the jurors. They get to actually strike them. They can ask the judge to strike them, and then they get what are called preemptory strikes, meaning no one can challenge the reasons for striking them. So the jury has already been very vetted. And then with regard to the judge being potentially biased, again, he doesn't really have any evidence of that. I mean, these sorts of rumors that the president is putting out there that she is a Democratic loyalist and such, that's just silly stuff. And obviously she has presided over really the majority of the Mueller prosecutions and has not shown herself to be biased, has not been removed in any of those cases. So I think this is a pretty weak argument.
You brought up the president, and I know that Attorney General Barr overruled the sentencing recommendation, from these 4 career federal prosecutors who then resigned from the case. It's not unusual necessarily, is it, for a top justice official to overrule career attorneys necessarily? It was a public rebuke of them. And because of that, I'm wondering, Shan, do you get the sense that some of this was orchestrated from the president himself?
Well, it's hard to know if the president directly contacted the attorney general, but he doesn't need to. I mean, as Michael Cohen testified, the president's well-versed in the art of subtlety. He doesn't give direct orders. Plus, he gets to communicate to the world and to Barr through his Twitter account and through TV statements, his press conferences, by the helicopter. It is not unusual for higher-ups in any organization to weigh in and make ultimate decisions. What doesn't make any sense here is all that goes on before you go to the judge and tell them what your position is. So that's a very odd circumstance here.
I gotcha. Yeah. I want to move on here real quickly to the Harvey Weinstein trial because it appears the jury may be deadlocked on 2 of the charges that he's facing. The jurors were sent home last night after 4 days of deliberations. Remember, he's facing 10 charges. A note from jurors, though, suggests that they were deadlocked on 2 of the most serious charges, the predatory sexual assault, each count punishable by up to life in prison. I know a source on his team has told CNN that Weinstein is, quote, cautiously optimistic but nervous. Which of those 2 do you think he should be more?
He should remain nervous. Generally, for prosecutors, the fact that the jury has taken a long time to work through the case, that's a good sign. But there's enormous pressure on those 2 counts. I mean, I've tried a life without parole case in a sex crimes issue, and it's like a civil death penalty. So there's enormous pressure there. Deadlocking on these 2 counts is critical. It goes to the heart of the prosecution's case because these are the counts that establish his modus operandi, his MO, if you will. They used uncharged conduct that was outside the time period to be charged, to show that he's predatory. So the fact that they're deadlocked on that, good, means they're taking that very seriously. Bad, because without that, they don't get the life without parole. But most importantly for the prosecution, big strategy question. They can keep the pressure on the jury. They don't want a partial verdict. They want to keep the pressure on all or nothing. That same pressure can cause potential issues in appeal if they get a conviction.
If they are deadlocked, just so we're clear, that means that some are ready to convict and some just can't get there. What do you think is the main element of contention here?
Well, now it couldn't even just be one person, Christy. It doesn't have to be like a split vote. Probably the tough part is that it's not charged. They won't be crystal clear why it wasn't charged. They may be told it's out of time. But it's an older allegation, and the biggest issue in the Weinstein case is this issue of consent, because he's the kind of predator, and they've had psychological expert testimony on this, who continued to engage in sometimes allegedly consensual relationships, friendships with the victims. The survivors felt they had to maintain a professional contact with him. For his team, that's like, well, what do you mean this was non-consensual? They stayed friends with me. They still wanted favors. In some cases, even had admittedly consensual sex later. That's the hard part for the jury. That's an outgrowth of the Me Too movement pushing the prosecution to go into areas where before they would have been too cautious. They would have said, let's just stay away from this, too much doubt.
Gotcha. Shan Wu, always appreciate your expertise, sir. Thank you so much.
Good to see you, Christy.
You too.